This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland.
Over the years, many Irish missionary sisters have done Trojan work among disadvantaged communities in Africa. This is a few of their stories, the stories of unsung Irish heroines in Africa.
I remember promising God that I would do the most difficult thing, which I thought was to leave home and go to Africa. There is in the Irish a certain, we like to travel. I think we like to go from our own. I thought it'd be great to travel in some ways, you know, and I said, wouldn't this be a great way to see Kenya? If you help anybody in the journey of life, I think, yes, you do get a great satisfaction, that is true. Another attraction of Africa was that I felt they needed help in education and health. We would have always had a policy in Holy Rosary to train people, to pass on and to move off. Don't put out your roots, train and move on. And so this is what we did in many of the places we were. A human life, that you could save a human life, if possible, if God would help you strong enough.
I'm Paul Wright and welcome to the 7th programme of Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa. Now, most of our missionary sister contributors to this series belong to a certain generation of Irish women reared in the pre-TV age Ireland. As a result, for many of them, leaving Ireland to go work on the missions was their first time away from Ireland and represented the adventure of a lifetime. Mary Coleman, a Holy Rosary missionary sister, explains her reaction upon first arriving into Nigeria in the 1960s.
I wouldn't have registered as a shock, I would have registered as novelty. I remember coming into Lagos Airport early in the morning and seeing steam coming off the ground and experiencing heat, actually feeling heat. And on the way between the airport and the hotel, where there were 3 of us travelling together, 2 of them were going back after being in Ireland on leave, and I joined them in London. And we were going in a bus or a small coach between the airport and the hotel, and I saw a man on a bicycle with a sewing machine on his head. And he was going along, cycling along the road, and people were moving to the market with their baskets, and the heat and the brightness was quite exciting. That day then there were 2 of us had to wait in Lagos all day to get a connection to Enugu in the east, and there was a lizard in the toilet. I remember it, and we were afraid to use the toilet, and we'd flush it, but of course the lizard came back. So that's my memory of that whole day there. And then towards evening we flew from Lagos to Enugu. And then the sisters from Onitsha met me, and we travelled in the evening when it was dark. It gets dark early, around 6:30, 7 o'clock, dusk. And coming along the road between Enugu and Onitsha, on the outskirts of the town, seeing little tables on the side of the road and a light. It would be in a tin or some container with oil in it and a homemade wick, and they were burning all along the road because there was no electricity. And then having to sleep with a net over the bed, and the heat, and then waking up next morning and the heat absolutely everywhere. You just couldn't get away from it. So it was those things, they were novel.
But it wasn't just experience in Africa that was exciting. There was also the added adventure of the long journey from Ireland to a faraway African land. And while nowadays we just hop on a jet airplane to get from one continent to another, when Holy Rosary missionary sister Hilary Lyons travelled in 1953 from Ireland to Sierra Leone in West Africa, It was by means of the merchant navy.
We were on merchant vessel Tamale, which was an old vessel that was running during the war. It was a merchant vessel and there were about 12 passengers, many going back to work in Africa. There were about 5 nuns. So we had a good journey. It took about 10 days and we got along fine. Made a big mistake the very first morning. I had bacon and egg and it was Friday and I never thought of it, and one of the young fellas told me afterwards, the young sailors, he said, "You did us a good turn today." I said, "How come?" Well, he said, "The senior engineer claims that we should keep the fast on Fridays, and when you took bacon and egg," he said, "we're away with it, we're home and dry." So then we went, we arrived. Oh, Lordy, we arrived. I was up very early in the morning to see the hills of Freetown, Sierra Leone. And I was flabbergasted. And I remember standing there on the pier, and tears strolling down my face. And Sister Helen saying, "Hilary, put on your glasses so they can't see." We didn't want to show the white feather at that stage.
And in contrast to Hilary Lyon's 10-day trip to Africa, it only took 4 days for Franciscan missionary sister Breed Power to travel from Dublin to Uganda.
I went out to Africa on a plane. I was one of the first to go by plane. It was the Hunting Clan. And the Hunting Clan was a twin-engined plane to go to Africa from London. So it took me 4 days to get there by plane. I went from Dublin to London the first night, and we stayed in London. And the next morning, then we got up about 5:30, and there were 2 other sisters, one going out for the first time and another going back, had been home on a holiday. And so we got on the plane, and we had to be weighed because they had to balance the plane on either side of one of these small planes. And we got as far as Malta. Now, I don't know how many hours it took us to go to Malta, but it was late enough because it was afternoon, and we were up early morning. And then from Malta we flew to, the next day, night in Malta, flew then to Wadi Halfa. And this was my first taste of Africa, and I was frightened with the crickets and the lizards on the wall and the mosquito nets, and we're in the middle of the desert. It was frightening. But I didn't mind it. As I say, I had the others with me, but I was a little bit scared.
I believe it. What part of Africa was it, Breed?
Wadi Halfa is in Egypt. It's in the middle of the desert. The Sahara Desert, and there was nothing but sand all around, and the Arabs were there serving us, and they were in their bare feet, and you just felt them coming up behind you, and it was a little bit eerie. I did feel it. But then the next day we started off again and moved from Wadi Halfa to Kampala, our destination, on the 3rd of October, the Feast of St. Therese.
Where is Kampala situated now?
Kampala now is the capital of Uganda, East Africa. And we were working at that time in Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, and down the east coast of Africa, you could say. So we went to Kampala was our first stop, and there we went to the head house there, which was in Zambia. It's a big hospital. And I knew I wasn't going to stay there, but I had a couple of days. And then I got with another sister, I was going to Kenya. And Kenya now is an overnight journey. I think I got on the train about 3 in the afternoon in Kampala, and I didn't arrive until 3 o'clock the following day in Nairobi.
And another woman who caught the train during her first few days in Africa was prior speaker Hilary Lyons. She took the upland Sierra Leone train from Freetown to Bowtown.
Yes, we came up on the train. Did we heat? Did we overheat? Did we have a sauna? My goodness, with the heat belting down on it. And then every place we stopped, little people would come with groundnut for sale, different fish, eggs, all sorts of things. We bought oranges and sucked them. And then the train broke down, but not a serious breakdown, just getting off the rail. There was no other train, so there was nothing much happened. We waited until they got it on again. And then we learned afterwards that they had a funny little rhyme. Now, I'm not a singer, but it went something like, the train for Bohin o da griefer go, the train for Bohin o da griefer go, for the engine don't tire, but they want a plenty fire, the train for Bohin o da griefer go.
Now, a major scourge to afflict our world for thousands of years has been leprosy, otherwise known as Hanson's disease. During the 1960s, Margaret Josephine Boyle, a Franciscan missionary sister, worked in a leprosarium for leprosy patients. Here she talks about that work, beginning with how patients were brought to the leprosarium in the first place.
They wouldn't have transports, they'd have carried them on stretchers, coming in. And you might have one sleeping in the bed and another one underneath the bed. So you'd have to kneel down to look after the one that was under the bed, because they'd come so far from far away, having carried that stretcher. You had to just take them and leprosarium. In my first 7 years, I worked in the leprosarium. Yeah, and now I wasn't qualified then, but I was working among them, helping them, doing needlework with the women and helping anything to keep them occupied, and entertainment. Yes, I loved music, and they had music and dance, and we had all sorts. I was there when the independence, Uganda independence in the beginning.
1964, was it?
Yes, and that was great celebrations for that. They had dance, and when I think of it now, I'm afraid we were imposing our dancing as well, when they were very good at Irish dancing.
It's hard to believe, doing Irish dancing in Uganda.
Now, as I think of it, it should only have been their own. But they loved it, and they really loved, and they got on to the Irish dancing, and
Also, how many people would have been in this leprosarium now?
Maybe a couple of hundred, maybe, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah.
So this was a big concern.
A very big leprosarium, yes. And they were able, they had outpatient treatment, and then they had, they used to come in for their dressings and so on. So many. At the time when I was there, I wasn't so much involved in the nursing part of it, so the numbers I didn't know. I was just helping anywhere I could, in that time.
And what language would you have been speaking now to the people?
Uganda, which all know very poorly, but I could manage a bit,
How difficult is it to learn now this language, Uganda?
The greeting was, Sibio Chano, Barunge, or Sibio Chano, or Tasanya Sanyoko Balaba. That means you're very welcome. How are you? So, and you have to bow down.
Margaret, just regarding this disease, this fabled disease, certainly mentioned in the Bible, leprosy, or called Hanson's disease is the official name for Hanson's disease sufferers. What exactly are the symptoms of this disease? How does it attack the person? And how do you go about curing that in this leprosarium that you worked in?
Yes. They would come in and they would have no feelings in their hands, and they come in very often with burns, and you'd see some of the fingers burned, and then they were tested. They had no feeling at all in their hands, and then circulation stopped, and they had amputation and all that. But they had treatment for it, all right. Constant treatment. They came in for their tablets. I forget them now. So long ago. But it never occurred to me that I touched them in every shape and that I would ever develop or get you just looked at them as an ordinary patient. That's one of the things, a blessing. I wasn't afraid in any way, and I'd handle anything. in that way.
Also, Margaret, I mean, you were saying as well, the actual approach to curing this disease. Now, how did you go about curing it, like in the leprosarium, when people came with the disease?
Some sisters, the qualified sisters, they did research on that, and they went out to the different places, and they got them when they were in the early stages. You see, they used to come in when it was too late, So they came in, and they really had some sisters now that are maybe not able to give an interview, that had great experience in that field, going out, and there's a survey with the people, with training them to be orderly, to be a leprosarium students, and that they taught them how to go about, and they went out and to combat it. The disease became less and less because they
were able to get out there and get to the root problem, out there in the villages where it was happened. And also it would have been quite difficult for
a school of nursing for training the leprosarians in this place I was at. Some of the sisters were teaching them how to cope with it.
And for those of you who've just tuned in, I'm Paul Wright, and you're listening to the 7th programme in our 8-part Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa series. The last speaker was Franciscan missionary sister Margaret Josephine Boyle, talking about her nursing work in Uganda in the 1960s. A few years after that work, Margaret ended up doing maternity work in the remote Sioma Bush Clinic in Zambia, situated a mile or so from the Zambezi River. Here's what Margaret had to say about her maternity patients.
They knew they would get their food and always a little bundle if you had clothes to give them when you go home. That was part of the packet, if you could afford something. Nothing much, but we always tried to have something for them, when they came. If we hadn't, they didn't mind either, but we always had something on the reserve, a little dress and a nappy. So they liked us because of that as well, and they liked the sisters, and they had great faith, and you get to know them coming to the clinic, and then they're looking forward to seeing you again.
And regarding the danger which crocodiles posed in the Zambezi River, which the Sioma Mission Clinic was situated beside, Margaret had this story to tell.
These two little boys, they were walking and they were out, I don't know what they were doing in the water, and then the crocodile came and took one of them, and they learned that if they put their 2 fingers into the eyes, the crocodile will open its mouth. So we saved a boy that way. The little boy, stood on the crocodile's back. This is very near. We were beside the Zambezi River, and he stood on it. And those 2 boys were brought in more from sheer fright than he had a little mark from the crocodile, all right, because he just only had caught him. When the boy was taught by his grandfather to put the 2 fingers into the eyes, and he'll open his mouth and he'll be released. And so it happened. And we treated them, 2 boys, for shock.
I'll tell you one thing, he was lucky that he had his grandfather to tutor him in survival and the Zambezi River. But I mean, the river must have been rife with crocodiles, was it?
Oh, it was. Many women shouting to each other and down doing their washing. Another woman saw the woman just disappearing. They were shouting across to each other, one from both sides. The crocodile, there were so many. I even saw them stretched out, brought up for us to see them, and stretched out, and see the length of them and the thickness. Lots of crocodile.
Wow! This is a dangerous world.
Not to walk too near the Zambezi. What to do if you sat at the river? They come right behind you. You don't see them, and you're pushed in.
Now, another remote outback clinic which Margaret Josephine Boyle worked in Zambia was the Kalabo Mission Clinic. in her early years in Zambia, travel to this clinic from Livingston was only 50 minutes by plane. However, when the plane service was terminated, the only way to reach Kalabo from Livingston was via an arduous 8-hour journey along the Zambezi River.
There was a plane when we went first, and the plane was only 15 minutes coming from the mainland. But then it could be 9 hours on a boat. So the plane stopped, and we used to, whenever we wanted to get across with the boat. But
why did the plane stop, and why did you? Why? Just lack of money, was it?
Lack of money, they wouldn't be able to just keep it. But on that plane, you would have a very small little plane, you know. You had hens and chickens. Didn't know what was going to embark when you came down the river. When we went over first, we travelled by plane going over, but then afterwards it was by boat. 8 hours, and a plank, you know, sitting straight on these boats, and with an engine, you know. Yes.
It must have been unbelievable. You were literally travelling up the Zambezi River on a boat for 8 hours. I mean, that's a long, long boat journey.
Yes, 8 hours. Oh, yes, many times.
What were the sights you would have seen?
One of the experience I had is that I developed hepatitis in those, and to come across, you know, to come across to one of our convents. We came down to Lusaka, and I wasn't very nice travelling after being very ill, you know, on one of those boats. But never mind, I managed it fine. Yes, we did that maybe every 2 or 3 months, maybe. We'd come down because we had another convent in Lusaka, and it was very nice to come away, and I get a rest now and again. You might come, so you had to come across to get to the mainland first, then go by road. The rest to Lusaka would be another 6 hours or so. The distances in Zambia were terrific. Very, very long distance. If you went shopping in the morning, and in one particular place we had no shops at all. You did your shopping once a month, and if you ran out of anything, you just had to do without it. So on the shopping day, when you came back, you enjoyed it. When you came back, you had the things that you hadn't before the rest of the month. But we didn't mind that. We managed fine. We had to cross part of the Zambezi on a small boat. They called it a banana boat. And I was along with another sister, and all the luggage we had for the vaccinations, and the staff were coming later, all the others. So the next thing, a leak started in the boat. It was a banana boat, a dugout boat, you know, and it started filling with water. None of us are swimmers, and there's crocodiles in the river. So anyway, we had 2 flasks. We took the top. Each one of us had the top of the flask, and we kept scooping out, and the man was thanking us, who was rowing the boat, thanking us for the equipment that we brought to help to bring us over. So all the time we were scooping and scooping and scooping.
Bailing for dear life.
Yes, and at last we got to the far side in the end, and he assured us that coming back that would be fixed anyway. But we asked each other, were you afraid? So we started singing Faith of Our Fathers. We kept saying just to forget that it could be serious. We all started singing Faith of Our Fathers, you know, on the way across. And from the time we arrived, when we arrived there, the man was singing. He almost had the words of the song as well. And so it was a joyful, it ended all joyfully. But we did he assured us that he'd had that mended before we come back. So we had no song coming back. Sometimes when I think of it, it could have been very dangerous, because he warned us. He said, this is very serious, this is very serious. He kept saying this, you know, but we weren't listening to him. And we kept singing and singing, and he would tell us again, it's getting serious. Well, can you keep going quickly? with your thing. So the next day our arms were a little bit swollen from scooping out the water for the whole time, going the whole time. Little things like that often happened, and you told the story afterwards, and whenever we meet and we laugh about what happened, in the past. But as we're getting older now, I often imagine, was I somebody else that was out there? Don't think I could cope with it now.
And here's what Margaret had to say about what motivated her to spend the best years of her life working in Africa.
We're all for each other, and that was my ambition, to help those who can't help themselves at the moment, and any help you can give is very rewarding for anyone. And as I was giving, I was receiving just equally as much as I gave, because the culture and the love and the things I learned were far beyond what I had given them, the people.
This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. Until our next number 8 programme in this 8-part Unsung Irish Heroines in Africa series, from myself, Paul Wright, bye for now.